Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, I met our guest not long ago at Snarly Cryptid Halloween, and we're going on a journey through the shadows of the past as he unravels the hidden tales in his cemetery tours. These stories are full of history, mysteries, and beyond. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a new friend to our show, the cemetery tour guide, Kevin Breeden. Kevin, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. I'm so happy to have you on so we can listen to these stories, my friend.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm very happy to be here.
We met not too long ago. I think it was it October?
Well, actually, we met a little over almost a year ago. We actually met in April at his show at Snarly show in Berryville, Virginia.
That's right. Over there was the outdoors one, right?
It was, yes, sir.
A lot of great folks were there, and
Indeed.
yeah, because who was there? Guys, I can think of a lot, but one that strikes me is he's also he reminds me a little bit like you, where he tells a lot of stories about cryptids and paranormal. With Gregory Fedora was there, and just like you, because I say that because over the weekend we were having a brunch with Snarly, and we're talking about some of these events, and he pulls up his iPad, and we're talking about doing a tour of a cemetery, and then every time he mentioned a cemetery, doggone it, man, you always had a little factoid about each cemetery, what's going on there in the history. So that's super interesting. But before we do that, my friend, how did this all begin? Because this is not an everyday person thing. Not a bad thing, but I think it's a thing that I think needs to happen more, because there's a lot of histories what comes along with these cemeteries forgotten in history. Like they're almost so much overgrowth, and then so much building new houses and businesses. These kind of things can kind of get pushed to the side.
I agree. Well, I was born and raised here in Charlestown. My father and mother both lived through the Great Depression. My father served in the U.S. Navy in World War II. He was the history buff. And I caught on at a very early age. And my dad was the type of person that if you liked a certain thing, he was going to feed the fire as much as he could. So while everybody else was going to the beach and stuff in the summertime, I was going to cemeteries, museums, lectures, what have you. And at the age of about 15 or 16, I became interested in the Civil War. And from there, I suddenly realized one day that you need to go to the cemetery because that's where the person is. And a headstone will talk to you. It will tell you things about this person. And from that point forward, I began to do a lot of work in the cemetery. I began to take people out and show them different people's graves, people we'd heard about since we were little kids. And it really caught on, and I enjoy it. I tell you, I would. It does sound very macabre, but I would rather be in a cemetery than I would just about any place else. It's peaceful. It's a lot of the larger cemeteries and a lot of the older cemeteries in our area are very well kept. They're beautiful, and there's just so many people there that had something to do with the history of our area or the country, for that matter, that are interred there. That it's a smorgasbord of history, but it's also great stories. A lot of great stories.
And depending on where these cemeteries are located, so the stories tend to change. So Well, before we get into that, can you tell by going to a cemetery around what time these cemeteries started?
Well, Edge Hill Cemetery, where I do a lot of my tours in Charlestown, was founded in February of 1852. The Episcopal Churchyard, which is just up the street from that, was founded in 1848. Antietam National Cemetery at the battlefield was officially dedicated September the 17th, 1867. And then I also have done a few things in Mount Hebron Cemetery in Winchester, and it was founded in 1844.
And when you go to the cemeteries, and I know that you have a lot of great stories about them, a lot of people would think it would be kind of a morbid thing to go unless you really know the people. But there's more about the history of the people that are there. Are the styles different where you go? And I mean this in respectfully, because you can go to a cemetery in one state to another. Is there a different vibe to these cemeteries, the way the headstones are, or the way everything's laid out?
Almost definitely. The Episcopal Churchyard here in Charlestown and Mount Hebron Cemetery in Winchester, a lot of ornate headstones. Antietam National Cemetery, they're mostly all the same. They're the military issue, government issue headstone. And then Edge Hill Cemetery is a little bit of both. You have some very ornate headstones, but you also have some very plain, smaller headstones. I'm a member of the Historical Society here in Jefferson County. I'm also a volunteer at our county museum. And we like to tell people that the people that owned Charlestown are buried in the churchyard, but the people that built Charlestown are buried in Edge Hill Cemetery.
Was there a reason for that? I think because different class of people, or is this?
Well, the churchyard, for instance, has almost 200 members of the Washington family in it. The Washington family. There are more people buried. There are more Washingtons buried in that cemetery than any other cemetery in the entire world. And yes, of course, you got to look at it from another standpoint. Edge Hill came into being in 1852 for one very simple reason. All of Charlestown's churchyards were filling up. So the churches all went together and purchased about 35 acres and founded the more traditional that we know of today cemetery.
And during these tours, I think one of the questions possibly that come up with the listeners, because of the type of show that I have here, that we have, a lot of people that say that maybe there's some sort of activity in these cemeteries. Have you found that to be true?
Yes, in both cemeteries.
And so what have you seen? What have you experienced so far? Because I guess it would depend on the type of people that are buried there, right?
Well, yes, in Edge Hill, I've had a lot of footsteps, voices. We had a spirit box in the cemetery one night, and it specifically, I was leaving to go visit my father's grave. And as I walked away, the voice came out of the box and said, "Kevin, where are you going?" And in the churchyard, you have, I've seen shadow figures. Here again, a lot of footsteps, noises, voices. I've never heard it, but I also understand you can hear the organ play at night.
Oh my word! Were you able to capture that on any kind of audio?
I haven't been able to get that one yet.
I mean, that sounds pretty amazing. I would be kind of eerie to hear that, but at the same time, it would kind of make you more interested in, well, why is it playing? And then you could probably figure out from there as to why. So one of the stories you were talking about, I think when we're sitting around eating lunch, is Snarly pointed to, I think it was one it was close to Hagerstown, Maryland. And I don't know if it was that one or not, but you said something that I found pretty interesting, is that there's a cemetery where somebody that was murdered is buried there, and the killer not too far away. Did I hear that right?
Mountain View Cemetery in Sharpsburg, Maryland. It's right across from Antietam National. The superintendent of the park, Charles Adams, in June of 1912, was out chopping weeds, and Charles Benner, a local farmer who was also a drunkard and a pretty violent one, had been tormenting this man for quite some time. He wanted a job with the government, and he kept saying that the park, or that the federal government had not paid his family for part of the land that they were putting monuments on. It became a heated argument. Benner pulled a pistol and shot Adams roughly between 12 and 15 times. And yes, Charles Adams is buried on a little knoll there towards the front of the cemetery, and you can look from his grave site to your right. And I'm going to say, about 35 yards away is Benner's grave. Adams died about 2 hours later. At that point in time, the state of Maryland didn't have a state police force. That doesn't come along until 1921. And the townspeople had had enough of Benner, and they had formed a posse. And they rode out to the Benner farm, and there had been several farmers who had witnessed the murder, and one of them had stayed behind to keep an eye on the place till help came. And he had heard a shot about 3 minutes before they got there. He was in the summer kitchen, and he had shot himself under the left eye and had killed himself.
Was it due to the guilt for killing the other person, or was he super drunk? What happened?
I think it had a lot to do with the fact that not only had he killed Adams, but I think he finally knew, because of the amount of witnesses and the crime itself, that the jig was up.
So he would have been better off killing himself than having the posse come in there and pretty much probably do terrible things to him.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they were going to hang him.
Yeah, kind of like the old Wild West kind of thing there.
Kind of, sort of, yeah. The sheriff's office was in Hagerstown. They had called, and the sheriff was on his way with some deputies. But, you're back in those days, whether it was on horseback or by early automobile, I don't know. But they were going to be a little while getting there. And he figured the posse was going to take care of him before the sheriff and his deputies arrived.
And so I guess he made the smart choice, not the first part, but the second part, and might as well just end it before they get to him. Now, being that you've probably been to that cemetery several times and given a tour there, when you've gone by yourself, and one can say this is not going to happen every time, have you been able to pick up anything in relation to that event?
Not there, but down along Burnside Bridge, which is where it actually happened at. I've had some uneasiness, and I know when I was a volunteer there at the park on several occasions, people reported that they saw a gentleman out chopping weeds, which is what Charles Adams was doing that morning. And the man spoke to him. And after they passed him by, they realized, gee, he's got on funny clothes, compared to what we wear. And they would turn around and there was nobody there.
Wow.
And that's been reported several times.
And did they just give him like a regular headstone, or did they just shove him in a hole and say good riddance?
Benner has a regular headstone. Adams was a Civil War veteran with a Maryland artillery battery, U.S., and he has a military-style headstone.
All right. And during these tours, so let's say, what does a normal tour go? Meaning that does the tourist, do they get to choose the location? Do you have somewhere set where say, hey, this is the best place to go at this time? Does it the seasons have anything to do with it?
A little bit of all the above. If I'm taking you to Antietam, it's going to be in the fall, because the Battle of Antietam was September the 17th, 1862, Wednesday. It depends in Charlestown on what they're looking for. If they want a lot of history, I take them to the churchyard. If they want a little bit of history along, and mostly ghost stories or paranormal stories, I take them to Edge Hill.
It's something like that. Now, I'm not really sure where Edge Hill is located, but I guess if you want something a little more ghostly, I would go somewhere like Harper's Ferry.
Well, the problem with Harper's Ferry for me is I don't know the stories as well as I do, of course, in Charlestown. And, there's so many permits, basically, because you're going into the park, which, of course, is federal property. So it's just easier for me. And here again, since I was raised, a lot of the stories that I tell, I've heard since I was a little boy. So I've heard them for over 50 years. And besides the cemeteries, I also do walking tours of the town. And I have several locations that have paranormal activity. And what I try to do is I'll give you, say, 5 buildings, and then I'll take you to the cemetery for the last half an hour, and it's usually the churchyard.
And with these locations in Charlestown, and I know we're not going to say their names. I know there's a few of them that go ahead and they do give tours, and sometimes you have to be a little careful who you choose to go to or what have you.
Right.
Now, with your tours and these locations, can you name one? Because recently, I don't know much about Charlestown yet, and I'm very interested in taking some of these tours. Which of these locations seem to have the most activity?
Well, if I had to pick 2, the first one I would pick would be the Jefferson County Courthouse. And the second one I would pick would be the Rebecca Hunter House, which is where the county commission's office is today, up next to the library. They seem to have the most.
And then prior to you being involved with the tours, whether they're going around town or cemetery tours, do you have a history of paranormal experiences, or is that something you eventually encountered when you started giving these tours?
No, actually, I've had some paranormal experiences ever since I was a little boy. At one point in time, I don't really think I knew what they were. And I do think that in a couple of cases, they were members of my family. One being my grandfather on my mom's side. So I've kind of been in tune to this stuff my whole life. And it was one of those things where it just kept getting deeper. More and more started to happen as I became interested. I became interested when I was 16. And a lot of people don't realize it, but I've been giving tours off and on since I was 16 years old, and I'll be 61 the 28th of March.
That's not too far away. Happy early birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And when you do the things that you love, it's not really work, but it's
No.
great.
It's something that I dearly enjoy, whether it's a history tour or a paranormal tour. It's just something that I live for, I think would be a good way of putting it. But it also seems that spirits tend to want to gravitate towards me for some odd reason. I'm not real sure why. But, I've been different places and heard voices and everything, and nobody else has heard anything. So they seem to be attracted to me for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. But, and at first it scared me. I'm not going to lie. And over the years, by the time I got up into my mid-20s, I just kind of settled in with it. It's just part of my life. I've had some experiences where people were with me, and jokingly, I've said, "Welcome to my world."
And when they're communicating with you, or you having these experiences, have you been able to, at least now you've had plenty of years to make some sense out of it, have you been able to find out what it is they want?
I've never really tried. I just feel that in many cases, these people had a life unfulfilled, and that they are longing to fulfill a life that they'll never be able to fulfill. And I guess they look at me as somebody that they can communicate with. And as the old saying goes, I'm a believer.
And I am as well. And I know and that's just fine. There's a lot of skeptics out there who
Oh, yeah,
perhaps, and it's hard to have a conversation with them, but then until they have their own experience and they understand.
exactly. Exactly. I liken it to getting a cold bucket of water in the face.
Yeah.
That, and of course, at first they're perplexed, then they go to fright, and then they go to wonderment. So, and I get a lot of people that come to me and tell me, I've had this happen, I've had that happen, I heard this, I saw that. And I'm like, well, the time was right. All the stars aligned for you. And it was their way of saying, yeah, we are real, we are here. And I just wanted to prove it to you.
And when, aside from the tours, I know maybe during the tours, or were you doing them on your own? Now, I mentioned that because I know a few friends in the past, and I know one recently that they're Civil War reenactors.
I was.
And some of them, oh, well, see, you kind of reminded me because you talked about that the other day. And this guy, well, this gentleman, he was telling me his story. And it's not the first time I've heard this. I don't know if he was in Fredericksburg area or somewhere towards there where there's been sightings of, or an apparition, somebody dressed like in Civil War time. And they see them 1 minute and they're gone the next. And it's not reenactors, but it's been something about this battlefield is active with paranormal activity. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yes. Yes, I have. I don't admit to this to a lot of people, but I've given tours before at a couple of different battlefields, and off in the distance, I've been able to see someone, and it could be from either side, blue or gray, and they'll be under a tree or looking around the tree and listening to what we're talking about. My reenactment group, back in the day, we did weekends at the park at Antietam. So we camped on the battlefield the whole weekend. We'd get there Friday night. We would do 2 sessions on Saturday, 2 sessions on Sunday, and then Sunday afternoon we'd pack up and go home. It was a Saturday night, and we tried to make things as authentic as we could to a degree. And of course, you have sentries at night, and it was always 3 people. So you had a guy that did midnight to 2, a guy that did 2 to 4, and a guy that would do 4 to 6. Well, if you had the kind of luck that I have, I always ended up being the one that was the 2 to 4. So I could sleep for a little while, then had to get up and then go back and sleep for a little while and then get up for the day. We were camped behind Dunkard Church, right across from the visitor center in the West Woods. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and I'm walking a loop, and our loop was from behind the Dunkard Church at our camp. We would come up to the Hagerstown Pike, walk down the road itself, the asphalt road, in front of the Dunkard Church, make a left, go down the other side of the church, back through the camp. So it's just a circle. And I'm walking along, musket up on my shoulder. And the brogans that we wore, which were the Civil War issue footwear, have what's called a heel plate. And it looks like a very small horseshoe. And it's nailed to the bottom of the heel of your boot because they're leather, and it keeps them from wearing out so fast. So you have that clicking noise. And I'm hearing, every time I hit the asphalt, I had a clicking noise, which was me. And then one time I come up and I'm starting down the asphalt and I got two sets of clicks. I got myself and another set of clicks coming from behind me. And of course, I'm 23, 24 and figured, one of the guys is trying to scare me. And I put up with it for about 15 or 20 minutes. And finally I said, I think I can get him before he really gets me. And I was pretty much in front of the church on the asphalt, the Hagerstown Pike. And I had the gun up like this. So I saw my chance. I kicked the butt of the musket into my shoulder. It starts to fall forward. I grabbed the gun, spun around like this, and come up like this. And there wasn't a soul behind me. I stood there for a couple of minutes, taking that all in. And I decided, okay, I guess this person is just trying to make sure I'm doing my job. And I went ahead and started my circuit again, and it lasted another, 15 or 20 minutes. And then one time when I came out and hit the asphalt, he was gone.
Wow. So other than that clicking stuff, did he say anything? Did you smell anything?
No, nothing. Nothing at all. Just that clicking noise. On South Mountain, up at Fox's Gap, which is a prelude to Antietam by about 2 days. I've heard the drums playing at about 3:30 in the morning. They had a thing in the Civil War called the long roll. And they would take all the drummer boys and they would take them out and put them on a hill overlooking the camp about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And they would play this long, continuous roll. And that was the reveille of the day. There was no bugle. It was the drums. And I heard the long roll for about 5 to 10 minutes. And I had a friend with me. And I was hesitant to say anything to him. And I turned to him. We were both sitting in the cab of my truck. And I said, "Did you hear?" He said, "You mean that guy, those guys that have been playing those drums for about the last 3 or 4 minutes?" And I said, "Yeah." So he heard it as well.
That's a long time to hear a sound, because normally I don't think they last that long.
No, but I guess that, they were the two Union Corps that were on the mountain that were leaving to go to what would be the Battle of Antietam had pulled out that morning at about 3:30. It was the 9th Army Corps was one of them. And of course, South Mountain was a bloody battle within itself. Antietam's the bloodiest battle in American history for one day. 23,300 casualties in 12 hours. And I guess it was just something that stuck with them in time. This was the beginning of one of the worst days of our life.
And that was just one day in the Civil War.
One day. Started at 6 a.m. and stopped at 6 p.m. There were roughly 500 cannon on the battlefield between the two armies. In 12 hours, those 500 cannon will fire a grand total of 31,000 rounds of ammunition.
There's nowhere to go.
No. I've read a couple diaries from both sides, North and South, and they wrote that the ground was smoking when the battle was over.
I bet with all that gunpowder and heat and the blood and just, I mean, it's terrible when you really think about it. Because I know that some of these movies are very popular to watch for entertainment, but there's nothing really, when you really think about it, it's not really that much entertainment about it.
There's no glory in war.
Yeah.
There isn't. And, I am a firm believer that on that battlefield and all the others for that matter, that amount of casualties and the way those people died and the hellish part of that battle, which any battle is hell, it just stuck in their psyche to the point I think that's a lot of the reason why they're still there.
And during these reenactments, and we'll go to a different part of what it is that you do, because it's very authentic with the uniforms and the boots and the muskets and all that. How hot does it get? Because I understand that these things are just brutal.
Well, I was in the fire service for 28 years, and I can tell you that not all the time, but at times, that uniform was hotter than some of the fires I've been in.
Wow.
And it's, I'm not going to say it's uncomfortable, but it gets very sticky very fast. That wool does have a tendency to want to cling, at least it did on me. And reenacting was my way of finding out what it was like for my ancestors who had fought in the Civil War, what they'd gone through.
Now, with that being said, do you know which of your ancestors fought in the war? Do you have any relics or pictures, of that time or artwork or anything?
Yes.
I do. And I had 21 ancestors that fought in the Civil War that I know of at this point. All of them fought under General Stonewall Jackson, but one. He fought under General James Longstreet, so they were all in General Lee's army. And I do have a few photographs of them, none in uniform. I have some old photographs of them that was taken late in their life in just regular suits. I did have one ancestor, a great uncle, who was wounded twice. And, people in that time frame were so much tougher than we are.
Yeah.
He was shot through the throat at the Battle of McDowell, Virginia, May the 8th, 1862. 2 weeks later, he fought in the Battle of First Winchester, May the 25th, 1862. A few months later, in August 1862, at the Battle of Second Manassas, he was wounded in the hip, and that took him out of the war for roughly 2 years. Just before the end of the war, just before Appomattox, he was captured and sent to Point Lookout, Maryland prisoner of war camp. He was sent there on March the 28th, 99 years to the day I was born.
Wow.
Went on after the war to farm. And he didn't die till I believe it was around 1921 or 1922.
And that is a whole level of tough, because you said earlier he was shot in the neck or the throat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't do him.
No.
Then when he got shot in the hip, and I understand I have hip issues myself. That took him out for 2 years, but he just kept going.
He just kept going. And one good thing about the hip wound, if there is any good thing about being shot, while he was home convalescing, he married.
Well, it must have meant to be. just to get him to slow down and find himself a sweetheart. And going back to the being very authentic in these reenactments, how authentic are we getting? What's on the dinner plate? What's for lunch? How is it being cooked? Because I would imagine you try to mirror how it was done back then.
Well, it's going to be over an open fire. It could be salt pork or bacon. It could be some type of stew. And that's usually all 3 meals.
What is that called? Is that called like cowboy stew or cowboy chili or something?
Something like that, yes.
And so, how long is it over a weekend? Is it like a week thing? Because I know that sometimes there's a lot of people that watch these battles when they're performed.
The longest reenactment I was ever in was the 125th anniversary Battle of Gettysburg in 1988, and it lasted 3 days. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
And when the spectators show up to watch the reenactments, I'm kind of a stage shy person myself. Does that change how you do anything, or just you forget about what's going on, just concentrate on the task at hand?
You pretty much just concentrate on what you're doing. There's been a lot of reenactments I was in where you get caught up in it to the point where you don't even realize the people are there.
And about how many people does it take to do a proper reenactment?
Well, that same battle back in 1988, there were 19,000 reenactors.
That is an amazing number of people.
It was. It was the biggest reenactment I was ever in. Usually, the hobby seems to be waning a little bit, but at one point in time, I've gone to reenactments that had 5,000 to 7,000 in it.
Wow! And during these reenactments, with the uniforms, are you making them yourself? Do you order them online, or how does that?
Well, back then there wasn't much of an online. I had a dear friend of mine's mother made me my first uniform off of an original pattern I was able to secure. They do have people who call themselves sutlers, just like the original sutlers during the war, who make and sell uniforms. And you can go online now, but they used to have shops, and then they would come to the reenactments and set up what was called a sutler's row, where you could go down and purchase anything you wanted.
And during this time, because eventually because I know you take shifts going on patrol, but when there's downtime, what kind of stories do you share with each other?
Oh, we talk about all kinds of things. We talk about the original battle. We talk about some of the funny stuff that happened to us during that day's event. When I was at the park, a lot of the rangers would come by in the evening in their civvies, especially on Saturday. And they would fill us in on things that were going on in the park, property that was being purchased, or a house that was being restored, or what have you. And you're talking about the next day's event, the next phase of that battle. And then just social stuff, talking about family, friends, stuff like that. Football, a lot of Redskins fans in my old outfit. And just things like that.
All right. And now going back to the cemetery tours,
Mm-hmm.
out of all the locations with these tours, which was the most popular? Which was the one that people like to go the most?
That's a hard one. I've had pretty much good turnout at every one of them. I do get a lot at Antietam National Battlefield. simply because of the history of it. I can tell you there are 2 graves in that cemetery that have a marked headstone, and that the 2 men that the headstone says is in that grave are not there. It's a misidentification, so actually they are unknowns. There is also a grave at Antietam. It's a great little story. There was a captain in the 6th Wisconsin Regiment who had a Newfoundland dog as a pet. Early in the battle on the 17th of September, he was killed. The dog stretched out over top of him to try to protect him. And you know, with that amount of lead flying, the dog ended up getting hit 9 or 10 times, so he was killed too. 2 official reports talk about when his men buried him, that they wrapped him in an army blanket, put him in the hole, wrapped the dog in an army blanket, and laid on top of him. And in 1866, when they started to disinter these people to make the National Cemetery, there's no record of whether the dog went back in the hole, went in the coffin, laid on the coffin, and went to the National Cemetery with him or not. And that is probably the most popular grave in Antietam National Cemetery. Everybody that knows anything about it, one of the first questions I get is, can you take me to the grave of the man with the dog?
And that story is both great and sad at the same time, because I'm a dog lover myself, and
me too.
And I've had a few pass, and I've had them cremated, having a nice little box.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping when it's my time that they'll go with me. Like, just put them in there with me, and that's the way it's going to be done. Now, I'm hoping by that time that SpaceX can actually start sending people in space. And I'm talking about, you want to have a burial. Do you want to be cremated? You want to be shot in space? I'm going to go in space. I think that's what I want to do.
I'm going to be cremated.
Yeah. Yeah, something cremated for me, and they shoot me up there. Then I could just be sprinkled in the atmosphere somewhere,
excuse me. I'm going to be buried in Edge Hill Cemetery with my family. And I thought that's pretty neat. All the years I've given tours of that cemetery, I'll actually be buried there. In fact, I've come up with my own epitaph. He loved to talk and speak of the past, and now he's part of the story at last.
No better way to end the great tour of you, my friend. Now, with that being said, if people want to get a hold of you to learn more about not only Civil War history and the history of Charlestown and the locations where there's hauntings, but they're also going to take your tours, how can they find out? How can they contact you?
Well, I think the best way would be my email address. I'm in the process of getting a Facebook page just for my tours, and it's going to be called the Cemetery Tour Guide, Charlestown, West Virginia. But my email address, and it's all lowercase lettering, is Kevin Breeden 64 at Gmail.
Awesome. And for the listeners out there, our friends that want to take a tour to come to Charlestown, and go ahead and email you, and then you're very quick to respond. And also this year, we have a lot of events that we're going to be at, and I think you're going to get sick of seeing me this year.
No, never. Never.
Awesome, man. And so with the seasons changing, when will be your first tour? You got one booked yet?
Well, I have a few booked more into the summer and the fall, and those are basically private tours. The group's already been put together, and they're friends or people that I know. I usually try to start my regular tours around the end of March or early April, depending on the weather. And I usually run through Halloween.
Awesome. Kind of like me. I usually try to end things through Halloween, and then sometimes I'll do that Krampus event, which I'm sure I'll see you this year as well. So, my friend, this has been awesome, because some of the stories that you're telling me, and I know that we just scratched the surface of this
We did.
And well, before we go, you have one more, a real good one that we can get into before we leave.
Well, John Yates Bell is buried in the Episcopal churchyard in Charlestown. He was wounded early in the Civil War, discharged because it was a leg wound. He ended up going in the Confederate Secret Service. And the Secret Service, both North and South, weren't anything like the Secret Service that we have today. In the South, it was more like the CIA. And in the North, they actually were formed to stop counterfeiting. He's captured late in the war. He's charged with treason and piracy. He's hanged in February 1865 at Governor's Island in New York Harbor. He's buried in Brooklyn. About 2 years later, the family got enough money together to bring him back to Charlestown. The ghost stories I have on him center around Governor's Island and the fact that he was a friend of John Wilkes Booth. And his sister at one point in time actually courted John Wilkes Booth. But I was doing a Halloween tour several years ago for a friend of mine. And where he's buried at in the cemetery, his gravestone's fairly tall. And I stand next to it. And the way the graves are laid out in that area, everybody has to basically stand on an angle to me like this. So I have to turn my head a little bit to talk to him like this. Body's this way, head's this way. And this particular night, I'm telling his story and telling the stories about his spirit at Governor's Island. And everybody's looking that way. And I did. I in my mind, I thought, you don't have it tonight. And one of them came forward towards me and said, look over your left shoulder. And there's a little dogwood tree that would have been standing to my left, down between his grave and this tree. And it has a fork in it. And when you turn your head like this, you look directly through the fork. And there was a shadow about 5 feet tall. And the eerie part of this is that the beautiful stone wall that surrounds that cemetery, John Yates Bell was the one that built it. The man I'm talking about. That's kind of his legacy. And as soon as I turned and looked through that fork and my eyes fell on this shadow, it shot back up the wall. I played football in high school. I was a defensive tackle. So I'm used to seeing some fast guys, and I can't catch them, by the way. This was the fastest I'd ever seen anything in a human form move in my life. And the neat part about it was, though nobody got a picture, I had about 25 witnesses. And we still talk about that.
That's great, because normally you don't have that many witnesses seeing the same thing.
No. So there was 20, counting me, roughly 25, 26 people saw this.
No, that's amazing. And that's one of the things that why I want to bring you back later this year, because I know there are more stories you're going to share with us, and I know for sure that I'm going to be taking one of your tours this year. So you let me know when you start, and we'll hook it up, man.
All righty, good enough. Yeah. I usually do them on Saturday nights because I work in Winchester, Virginia. And by the time I get home, I don't get off till 5 p.m. By the time I get home, eat and get cleaned up, it's usually 8:30. And I usually start my tours at 7 and they run to about 9:30.
You know, that's not too late. And being that I do a lot of these shows, I've become quite of a night owl. So
yeah, me too.
I think I'll be all right. So my friend, thank you so much for
You're
being
very
on the
welcome.
show.
Thank you. I had a good time.
Me too, my friend. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The debut book by Diego the Podcaster. I Remember the Crib delves into one man's extraordinary encounters with the strange and paranormal. Diego the Podcaster takes readers on a journey through a collection of short real-life stories that unveil his untold experiences. Diego offers a unique glimpse into a life filled with inexplicable events that have remained a secret until now. The readers are invited to explore the mysteries and wonders that have shaped Diego's existence, that gave birth to his podcast, Let's Find Out with Diego. Available now on Amazon Kindle. Published by Zombie Media.
Let's find out with Diego, the power of Diego Mania! All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.